Hi, I'm Don Blackwell. I'm the Executive Director of the Gospel Broadcasting Network. Welcome to this episode of Truth on Wheels. Sometimes on Truth on Wheels, we do coping episodes in which we deal with difficult things that Christians sometimes encounter. And this episode is going to be one of those coping episodes. In this particular program, we're going to be dealing with the topic of coping with an unfaithful child. That is, if you've had one of your children who's a Christian, but they have left the faith. And I have a guest today. Brother B.J. Clark is with us. B.J., thank you for being on the program today.
It's good to be with you. Yes, sir.
And B.J., of course, is the director of the Memphis School of Preaching, where I'm a graduate, and my son is a graduate, a great school. If you are looking to attend a school of preaching, I would highly recommend the Memphis School of Preaching. Not the only good school, but one that we certainly are fond of. BJ is a regular on GBN, and he is the co-host of the Counterpoint program with Mike Hickson, and BJ always does a great job. So we are very glad that you took the time. Super busy guy. You had the Foundations Camp last week, and I think you're about to go to another camp in the next week or so, right?
Sir,
yeah.
Sir. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you very much. This particular episode, as I mentioned, is a coping episode. We've done various programs. We've done coping with paralysis. I've talked about my situation. We've done a couple of people that are coping with ALS, coping with the loss of a spouse. Today, we're dealing with coping with an unfaithful child, specifically referring to members of the church who have a child or a family member who has become unfaithful and is presently in a lost condition, and you've graciously agreed to come on the program and talk about this today. So I want to just begin with some general information and ask the question about the frequency of this. How common is this to encounter members of the church who have unfaithful children?
You know, as I've traveled, I've had more and more elderly couples come up to me with tears in their eyes, saying, "Brother Clark, please pray for my child, my son, my daughter. They've gone astray. We tried our best." And you can tell that they're beating themselves up about what they might have done wrong, where they went wrong. And sometimes parents do go in the wrong direction and regret things they did or didn't do. But I've also watched a lot of very godly parents who did their dead level best, who are just bewildered. They don't understand what's going on. They just feel such pain, and they're looking for an answer, and sometimes that answer is very elusive.
Yeah, I've had the same sort of experience as I've traveled, that I deal with this or I encounter this. People have come and they talk to me, and I know that sometimes it is the case that one couple I know specifically that they were not faithful when they were raising their son, and now he's grown and he's unfaithful, and they know it was at least partially their fault. Right. But it's not always the case, but it's a common thing. And so I think this program is going to impact a lot of people.
Yes, sir.
Well, that brings me to the next point, and that is I want to talk about the effect that this sort of thing has on the family and specifically on the parents. So what effects does it have? One of the things I wrote was guilt. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's probably the first feeling that a parent has is a sense of guilt of what did I do wrong or what did I not do that I should have done? Was I present enough? Did I teach enough? There are all kinds of questions. I think it creates doubt coupled with guilt that, is just sometimes looking for an answer. And I know it can be very bewildering. I know of a situation where a parent just asked their unfaithful child point blank, "What did we not do, son? What did we do that caused this?" And in this case, the boy pointed at the Bible and said, "You taught me everything that's in this book. I just don't want to do it. I don't want to live according to this book." That doesn't bring any joy to the parent or sense of relief in the situation their child is in, but it does show that sometimes just as Adam and Eve were well taught completely what they needed to know and still made a free moral choice to go in the wrong direction, that it's not impossible for that to happen today.
You know, we recently, my wife and I, found ourselves in this situation, and we have beat ourselves up about this, and we've asked ourselves, what did we do wrong?
Mm-hmm.
I asked myself, was I too hard? Was I too soft? Did I not show enough love? Where did I drop the ball? Did I go on too many gospel meetings? Did we not do enough home devotionals? Do we not cover the right subjects in our home devotionals? Was I not the right? And on it goes. But I think the conclusion that we've reached is we did all the right things. We were very conscious in trying to do, and we've got 2 children that are very faithful, but still I come to the conclusion we did all the right things. We punched all the right boxes. We taught.
Right.
We took them to services. And even though I go through that in my head, I still beat myself up thinking, I still go through that on a regular basis. It had to be my fault somewhere.
I think it's because we care so much and would have done anything to keep it from happening. I watched my dad go through this. I was raised in a family where 3 children were present, all raised by the same mom and dad. 2 of the 3 are faithful, and were, for years, one of our siblings was unfaithful, but just very recently was restored after years of being away. So there is hope.
Yes.
But I watched my dad as a boy. I remember this. I was a young man, but I watched him beat himself up and I didn't understand, not having been a parent at that point. I just watched him beat himself up looking for answers. And then I remember, told me, he said, I realized there's never been a more perfect father than God. God, you can't beat being the kind of father God was to Adam and Eve, his children that he created. He taught them everything. He was present with them sufficiently. Is there one more thing? If he'd only just told them this one more thing, they would not have partaken of the fruit.
If he'd have been in the garden more often.
Right. So you start looking at, and we can't indict God for some parental failure. So how do we explain this then? It's free moral agency. Children have the right to make decisions that are based on their choices. That's why I'm not particularly fond of the illustration I've sometimes heard people use in sermons that it's true, children are like arrows based on Psalm 127, but the way that's sometimes presented in sermons that I hear is like you just aim an arrow at the target, you're going to hit it every time. You just have to aim them in the right direction. Well, an arrow is not a free moral agent with a mind to make a choice. It has no choice as to which direction it's headed. Did God not aim Adam and Eve in the right direction? He did, but unfortunately they chose to go a different direction than they were taught. They were well taught, but went astray.
You know, you talking about your dad and you not really understanding it, not having been a parent, and then hearing what you've said. After experiencing this, I've thought, I think maybe I've been judgmental because I had some of those same thoughts. Well, it was their fault, and I analyzed, and, well, obviously they did something that I don't know about. And now I sit back and think, I don't think we did. I think we did all the right things. Could we have been more perfect? Well, what parent could not be
exactly
more perfect? But I think especially comparatively, I guess I'm just saying that now being in the situation, I don't see it the same thing.
Right, and I could not have been more perfect father than God was. Did that keep Adam and Eve from going astray because they had a perfect father? No. Every parent should do the self-examination. The Bible's clear enough on what it says a parent ought to do. The question is, can a parent do what they ought to do and still have a child make bad choices? And, I used to, I'm like you, I used to see a child sometimes acting out, and I'd say, well, that child's just not disciplined. And often that's true.
Yes. Yeah.
I can't say that there's no time when that's not the case, but I remembered I came across a text one time in Jeremiah 2 and verse 30 where God says, "In vain have I smitten your children. They received no correction." God had given the correction. You remember in Isaiah 1, he said, "I've nourished and brought up children."
Mm-hmm.
Did you do a good job? Yes. No one could do a better job. Now, he's talking about the children of Israel, but the principle still applies. He was the one guiding them, leading them, feeding them. And he says, "I've nourished and brought up children, and they rebelled against me."
Right.
Isaiah 1, 2, and 3. If that can happen to God, it can happen to us. Even in the case of God, he had tried to apply corrective discipline. They just weren't willing to receive it.
Well, let me ask this question then. If we are blaming ourselves and the blame, and I'm not trying to excuse parents. I know sometimes there is blame there,
Right.
so I don't want people to think that. But if you've really done the right things and they go astray, who is to blame? What is the cause of this?
Right. I'd have to go to the Garden of Eden and think, well, okay, if God's not the problem here, what is the problem? It is the problem of people still being enticed by the temptations of the devil.
Yeah.
And the devil did not look at Adam and Eve as untouchable just because they were taught by God.
Right.
So do I think he's going to look at my child as untouchable because I'm a gospel preacher or because I'm someone that has studied the Bible and had a good Christian family to grow up in? He's going to go after every soul he can get to, and we just need to do our best to try to equip them, knowing that Satan's still going to try even when that's the case.
Yeah, I think it's James 1:13, "Let no man say when he is tempted, I'm tempted of God. God tempteth no man." But verse 14 says, "But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed." If you train up your child right, that does not mean the impossibility of apostasy.
Right.
Which is almost the way it's taught sometimes. If you train it right, they will not depart from the faith. But still, every man is drawn away of his own lust. We still have lust. We still have temptations. They're still there, and we can be drawn away.
You know, it's interesting. One of the texts that I used to not pay that much attention to that really helped me to see some things is Ezekiel chapter 18, where he describes this situation in Ezekiel 18 where he talks about someone who is just. He says in verse 5, "If a man is just, he does what's lawful and right. He goes through all of his great qualities, things he hasn't done. He's walked in my statutes. He'll live," God says in verse 9. And then verse 10, "If he beget a son that is a robber, a shedder of blood," and basically his son does the very opposite of what he does. God's already pronounced him as a just man. His son goes astray and does wrong, and then he gives a description of if he, verse 14, begets a son that sees all his father's sins that he has done and says, "I don't want to do that," and then he lives righteously. The point he's making is that every child's going to make their own choices. That's why Josiah, without a good father, still made the free moral choice to become a righteous king, and it can happen.
And, of course, the verse we oftentimes use, verse 20, we use to show that you can't inherit sin, but the principle applies here. The son shall not bear the guilt of the father, neither shall the father bear the guilt of the son. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon him. The wickedness of the wicked shall be upon him. The point being, the father might be righteous, but that doesn't mean the son's going to be righteous.
Exactly.
And it doesn't mean he's going to inherit the righteousness of his father. The father could be righteous and the son could be wicked, or vice versa.
We've always taught that the father in Luke 15 represents God. Well, does God have any unfaithful children? Sadly, the answer is yes. And the younger son wanted all the things. He was enticed, as you noted, James 1, by his own lusts. He went into the far country, engaged in riotous living. He didn't learn that from dad. He didn't learn that from his father.
Yeah.
And he knew that because when he was in the far country and began to be in want, his first thought was, I can go back home to my father's house. And so parents in pain need to realize the prodigal in the far country doesn't always stay there. Sometimes they come home.
Yeah.
And that's what we keep looking over the horizon for, hoping that it happens.
That's right. And when you think about James 1:13 and 14, every man is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. It could be, though you've taught them the right things and put the right things in front of them, they're surrounded by friends who are putting other things that appeal to their lust. Maybe it's a spouse, maybe it's a boyfriend or a girlfriend, or there are other people in their lives that influence them and impact them other than just you.
You know, you saying that reminded me of the first part of Proverbs 4 compared to the later section of Proverbs 4. In the first part of Proverbs 4, he says, I give you good doctrine. So there's good teaching coming from a father to the son. He says in verse 4, he taught me and said, let thine heart retain my words, keep my commandments and live. And so here's a well-taught child, but then the warning's given later to that well-taught child. Verse 14, don't enter into the path of the wicked. Don't go in the way of evil men. Avoid it. Don't even go by it. So what's the point? If he didn't think a well-taught child could be seduced into living in a sinful way, he wouldn't have given all these warnings. The child is given a command also. We often preach to the parents, and well, we should, but we also need to preach some sermons to the children of Proverbs 4. Take fast hold of instruction. Don't let it go. Keep it. She's your life. And make sure that what you've been taught, you hold on to.
And this is going through my mind as you're talking. Psalm 1:1, blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is on the law of the Lord, and he meditates on it day and night. What's the point? If a man sits in the counsel of the ungodly, or he stands in the path of sinners, that's going to have an effect on him. Isn't that 1 Corinthians 15:33?
Correct.
That evil companions corrupt good morals. So maybe good morals have been put into that person, but the man who goes and walks in the counsel of the ungodly and stands in the path of sinners and sits in the seat of the scornful, those evil companions corrupt those good morals that were put into him.
Very well said. How did those good morals get in there? Likely some parent or guardian put those morals in there, but that's not, okay, now we're done. Now it's like, okay, let's try to maintain this.
Yeah. I want to shift gears for just a minute, and I want to talk about the painfulness of this for just a second, because I think that those who are experiencing this, they go through tremendous pain. I hope I can talk about this, but
I understand.
There is nothing more painful. What does this do to you on the inside?
On more than one occasion, my wife and I, in going through these feelings, said it would be easier to bury a Christian child and know that they're eternally safe than to be at home not knowing where they are or if they're safe or what they're doing in the far country. Because if they've passed away in the Lord, at least you know they're safe. It's hard. It's, in fact, some ways worse than losing a child to death is losing a child while they're still living and watching them live in spiritual death.
Yeah.
That's not an easy thing to do at all.
I've said it's been the worst thing I've ever experienced. And I've experienced some bad things. But I thought even with paralysis, it'll come to an end one day. But this might not. And that's what haunts you in the middle of the night. And I think it's always in the back of your mind,
Yes.
It affects you on a deep level. As you mentioned, if they died in a faithful condition, that would be better. It's gotten me to the point, I don't want to see old pictures because I remember how it used to be. The old songs that were family favorites, they just hurt. And somebody mentioned, and I thought about this, you mentioned Luke chapter 15, the prodigal son. And Luke 15:20 says, he arose and he came to his father, and when he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. I heard a preacher suggest, and this struck me, why did he see him afar way off? And that's because he was always looking.
Absolutely. In fact, I had on my mirror, I still do, and it was there for a long time. It was there for years. I note that our youngest child wrote to encourage me, saying, they still have time. They can come home like the prodigal. And every day I started my day by looking at that note of hope, because as much pain as you're in, you got to grasp for hope. You're looking for something to get you through this. And I heard a preacher one time say, and I thought it very, very unfortunate that he would say it. He documented the truth that a lot of children are leaving the church and leaving the home, leaving the faith. Then he said something that, he said, let me tell you something. He said, they're not coming back. They're not coming back. And I wanted to say from my seat, what about Luke 15? Sometimes they do.
Sometimes they do.
And that's what the parent is constantly looking over the horizon, just hoping that maybe this is the day. And I will say this, there was a time period when we'd prayed, and then I think our prayers lessened in their intensity. And then I talked to my wife about this, and so we started praying more fervently every day, saying things like, God, you know what it takes for someone to providentially be moved to come in the right direction. If it means our sickness, if it means whatever it means, please help us. But we started praying more fervently and expectantly. And then last year, in the last year or so, we saw a prodigal come home. And so that is what every parent is hoping for. But it was years between the time of departure and the time of return. And those are painful, painful years, and it's hard to get through. One good thing is we never turned on each other. My wife and I never disagreed about the way to handle this. Fortunately, we were able to be on the same page, and we never stopped loving our children.
There's also, when you talk about the effects, there's kind of an embarrassment with it. You don't want other people to find out. And for a while, we were keeping it a secret because of that. But I've realized, I think a lot of people feel that, and maybe it's better to admit it. And I've actually taken great consolation in other people that have talked to me and shared things like what you're saying right now. And that's kind of what I'm hoping with this program. There are some people that can get some comfort, and we'll talk about some hope here in a minute. I always close out coping episodes with hope.
Right. And I know for years, my preaching was, I just avoid the subject of preaching on child rearing at all, because I thought to myself, if I preach on this and anyone knows that I've experienced this, they're going to think, what a hypocrite. You don't even know what you're talking about. And a lot of people are just not well schooled in that. So I've started teaching on that subject without giving a free pass to parents not to examine themselves, I have pointed out things like, all right, whom did God choose to be the mother of his son, his only begotten son, Jesus? Mary.
Mhm.
All right, God would not have chosen a bad woman to be the mother of Jesus. So she has to be a good woman, a good mother. Yeah, when you get to John 7, Jesus' grown brothers, half-brothers,
Right.
say to him, why don't you go and show off your messianic mission? And if you read the text at first, because there's no tone there, you think, wow, they're very encouraging. And then you get to verse 5, for neither did his brethren believe in him.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, if the Son of God's mother, Mary, couldn't get her children at one point in time to believe in Jesus as the Son of God,
Yeah.
then it's not impossible that a parent today could have trouble with that,
You know,
because she knew who he was.
I have never thought about that. That is a great point. And you know what occurs to me? James, the brother of Jesus, apparently the writer of the book of James,
Right.
did come back and believe in him and had great faith. And so here's one who changed.
Right. And I believe Jude may fall into that
Yeah, that's
same
right.
category.
Too.
So there's some, leanings toward hope right there, is that these individuals who didn't believe in him did eventually come around. So parents, don't give up.
That's right.
Sometimes the years can bring different things.
The hurt, it hurts family unity. Family things are not the same. You don't worship together like you did. You don't have the same values with each other. You don't share the same joys. It might be you don't even share holidays together anymore and get-togethers. There's an empty place. And so the pain is very real. It's very constant. So how do you handle this? People struggle and they ask the question, okay, how do I deal with an unfaithful child? What am I supposed to do? Do I disfellowship them? Now, if they've been withdrawn from officially, then there are certain appropriate actions that you're going to follow. But what if they haven't? And many times that's the case. They have not been withdrawn from. How do you deal with that? Do you just personally withdraw from them and practice Matthew 18, 1 Corinthians 5? Or do you try to keep the door open? What do you say to the person asking this question?
I think of the Amos 4 approach that God took with his own children of Israel. You try different things first before you get to the thing that's the hardest to do. You remember there in Amos 4, God says, I sent you this to try to get you to wake up, yet have you not returned to me? But he didn't immediately write them off. He said, I tried this. Obviously, by doing that, he's showing there's a problem here, and I'm trying to fix it.
Right.
And several times in that text, it says, yet have you not returned to me? So I tried this, yet have you not returned to me? And that continues on, and then finally he gets to where he says, okay, I've tried everything, prepare to meet your God. And that's a judgment statement. And a parent needs to first exhaust their opportunities to try to bring back the child. Paul wrote to the church at Corinth condemning their actions, but working with them over a period of time to try to get them to come to the right conclusions and the right actions. So he didn't immediately write them off, but he let them know that that time could come. And so a parent has to convey, I'll always love you as my child, but there's some things I'll not be able to endorse or participate in.
Yeah. If you had a child that was in a homosexual relationship, that homosexual partner would not be welcome in your house.
Right.
That is not going to be, unless they're coming for, fixing this situation, but we're not going to bring them in and act like everything is okay.
Right. You cannot look the other way and pretend that there's nothing really going on here. At the same time, you could say, look, I'll always love you, but that doesn't mean I'll endorse you. I remember my dad saying to a teacher one time, when I'd gotten in trouble in grade school. He said, look, if my son does wrong, punish him, and when he gets home, we'll punish him too.
Yeah.
That's the kind of dad I had. I'm sure you.
We need more of that today.
Yes, right. So you've got to draw some lines, or respect the lines that God has drawn, while at the same time realizing the character of God was not to immediately write off, but to attempt to restore.
You know, you just triggered the thought in my mind from 2 Thessalonians 3:14 and 15, which apparently is a person who has been withdrawn from. If any man does not obey our word by this epistle, in this epistle, note that man and do not have company with him, that he may be ashamed. I think he's saying you're going to withdraw fellowship. But even in that case, yet do not count him as an enemy, but admonish him as a brother. So even a person who's been withdrawn from, the door's open, you admonish him, you encourage him, you love him as a brother. You constantly are letting him know, we love you, we want you to come back.
Right. I had a conversation in which the following statement was made. All attempts had been made to make restoration, restitution, reconciliation, and then, another problem comes up, and my wife said, we're not going to be able to help with this, and it's reached a point where we have to, we can't bail you out of this one. Later, at the time, it was treated as if, how could you be so unloving, so hateful, so unkind? But just recently, the comment was made to me that was something I didn't enjoy at the time, but something I needed at the time.
Thinking about this and how do you handle it, Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way they should go, and when they're old, they'll not depart from it. How has that been misused? Before I make the point I'm going to make, how has that been misused?
Right. It's been misused to say, if you teach your child in the correct way, they'll never go astray, that it's impossible for them to go astray. And it's really turned into almost a once saved, always saved kind of passage for some people.
But I think when we think about how to handle this and what we can do, that passage does give me hope. And that is, if you train up a child in the way they should go, oftentimes they do come back because they know.
Right.
And that's in their heart. And so maybe their lust and things have pulled them away and drawn them away, but they've been taught and they know. And when they can overcome those things, they do return.
They have something to come back to, like the prodigal did. And I've noticed as children mature and get away from some of the woke cultural influences that cause them to think things that are improper, as they mature, they suddenly start realizing, you know what, it's the old saw, I've become more like my dad than I ever realized or thought I would. It's part of that is just maturing. And so you pray, and Tish and I remember praying, just let a child live long enough to come back to what they know. In fact, the phrase I've often prayed is help them to have time to come back to what they know, what they were taught.
Right.
That's the prayer. That's what the prodigal did. It can happen. It's what we all yearn for.
Yeah. Well, let me close out with this question. What can we do? What biblical advice would you give to parents, family members who are trying to win back a lost child, a sibling? How do they deal with this? And, oftentimes people come and in desperation, a preacher comes and visits. They've already asked everybody. So a visiting preacher, they pour out their heart saying, what can I do? Tell me what to do. They're just desperate. What advice do you give these people?
As I've often said, look, don't ever underestimate the power of prayer, but remember that prayer sometimes is not answered immediately overnight, but that doesn't mean it's not doing any good. And you have to wait on the Lord sometimes, and you have to pray for providential things to occur in the life of the child that might cause them to evaluate their eternal destiny and realize why their path right now is, and you ask questions. When you do have the opportunity to have conversations, you're calm, you remain calm. This is hard. Sometimes you have to say, okay, well, how's that working for you? And how is that better than what the life you would have had if you'd continued to follow the Lord? And oftentimes, though they may not admit it to you at the time, they may be thinking things that are helping them come back. 3 steps forward and 2 steps back is still 1 step progress. And sometimes that's what you have to do is be content with at least a step of progress.
Any, as far as them dealing with it personally in the meantime, what biblical consolation can they turn to?
Yeah, I think of casting all your care upon him, for he careth for you. It's helpful to know that God understands what it's like to have unfaithful children, because he's had some and he cares for them. And the book of Hosea shows us he's willing to forgive in amazing ways. And that's another thing we have to convey, is a willingness to show mercy and forgiveness. And when the prodigal came home, the father didn't run to meet him so he could give him a piece of his mind.
Right.
He went out and showed fatherly affection and welcomed him home. That doesn't mean, the text never goes on to say that there weren't challenges to deal with after he returned home. But the point is, he's home. He was lost, but now he's found. He's alive. And that's the hope that keeps a lot of praying parents in pain going, that yearning for maybe the day that we see him coming over the horizon.
I love that. I'll close out with this. I know the context is a little different, but I think it offers hope in this context. As 2 Peter 3:9, the Lord is not slack concerning his promise, as some men count slackness, but is long-suffering to us, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. The point being, God wants our unfaithful children to come home. He's long-suffering. He's waiting. Providentially, he's making and providing every opportunity that there can be, and he's rooting for them just like we are.
Amen.
So,
yes, sir.
Thank you so much, BJ, for being on the
Thank
program today.
Yes, sir.
Love and appreciate you.
You too.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Truth on Wheels. Until next time, be faithful.